Mr. President.
Senate Minority Leader.
Now, the most important item on the Senate's to-do list before the end of the year is a bipartisan emergency relief package for a nation suffering the worst month of the COVID-19 pandemic. Negotiations continue between a bipartisan group of Senate and House members who last week agreed in principle on a $900+ billion emergency relief proposal. As the details continue to get sorted, Speaker Pelosi and I have encouraged everyone to use this bipartisan proposal as a framework for negotiations. Yesterday, the White House presented us an offer of similar size, around $900 billion, an encouraging sign that the Republican leadership is moving in the right direction by endorsing the size of the Gang of Eight's bill. But the President's proposal must not be allowed to supersede or obstruct the bipartisan congressional talks that are underway. That is where the real action is, and where bipartisan agreement on the basic concepts will ultimately be forged. The President's proposal, for instance, completely misses the mark on unemployment benefits and aid to American families. In order to include $600 stimulus checks, it actually cuts proposed unemployment benefits by greater than a factor of 4, from $180 billion to just $40 billion. An unacceptably low amount, while tens of millions of Americans remain out of work, almost all of whom have lost their jobs because of COVID. Economists from every end of the spectrum, including the conservative U.S. Chamber of Commerce, are warning us that the United States faces the prospect of a double-dip recession without another round of emergency fiscal stimulus. A robust unemployment benefit is crucial to that program. Earlier in the pandemic, it helped keep 12 million Americans out of poverty and propped up consumer spending. We shouldn't be cutting unemployment benefits now, as the President's team proposes. We should be extending them. Now, the Republican leader, as usual, gave a very angry speech this morning accusing Democrats of all manner of things, including intentionally blocking aid to thwart President Trump. I don't know what evidence he has of that, but there are actual reports, honest-to-God reports, in the New York Times and the Washington Post that Leader McConnell was warning the White House not to cut a deal on COVID relief before the election. Here's the Washington Post, quote, McConnell warns White House against making stimulus deal as Pelosi and Mnuchin inch closer, unquote. That's from October 20th, 2 weeks before the election. Meanwhile, Democrats have continually lowered our proposals, now by over $2 trillion, to move closer to our Republican colleagues in the spirit of compromise and for the sake of getting something done for the American people. It would do a whole lot of good if the Republican leader would drop the daily tirades and diatribes, which seem to be based on some alternative reality, and join the rest of the Senate in urging the bipartisan negotiations now underway to continue. Families all over the country are nearing a point of desperation, unable to put food on the table, a roof over their children's heads. By January, nearly 12 million renters will owe an average of nearly $6,000 in back rent and utilities, a shocking figure. We need to deliver an emergency relief package to keep American families, workers, and businesses afloat until the crisis finally begins to subside. The only way to get that done is in a bipartisan fashion. The sooner the Republican leader realizes it, the better. Now on Biden nominations. President Biden continues to roll out an impressive slate of secretaries designate to lead cabinet agencies in his administration. Yesterday, he selected Lloyd Austin to be the next Secretary of Defense, another groundbreaking selection. Mr. Austin would be the first African American to lead the largest cabinet agency in our government. Secretary-designate Austin is a familiar face to many of us on Capitol Hill. And I'm also pleased to say he's a familiar face to many in the North Country in New York. He's the former commander of the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum, the pride of Jefferson County. Like all of President Biden-elect's security nominees, Secretary-designate Austin is deeply experienced and familiar with our nation's national security, as well as many issues that face our service members and their families each and every day. Lloyd Austin served our nation for more than 4 decades, and his willingness to serve his country again is admirable. He'll make an excellent Secretary of Defense. Now, an hour ago, I met with President Biden's elect economic team by teleconference, including Secretary-Designate of Treasury Janet Yellen, to discuss priorities for the incoming administration and how to get our economy back on track. I urge them, once President Biden becomes president, to go bold, that austerity right now is not what America needs, but a bold program to stimulate our economy and get things moving, to help get people jobs, good-paying jobs, because our economy is suffering. And I look forward to our continued conversations. A few weeks ago, I predicted that we'd see some crocodile tears from the Republican majority about Biden's cabinet nominees, but I didn't think it would occur this fast. It began when several Republican senators raised some objections over Neera Tanden's Twitter feed. After 4 years of pretending that, quote, they didn't see President Trump's latest online outburst, it seems that Senate Republicans have rediscovered their Twitter passwords now that Joe Biden is the president-elect. This week, after President-elect Biden announced that Xavier Becerra is his pick to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services, Republican senators raised concerns in their minds about Becerra's qualifications. The senior senator from Texas said, "I'm not sure what his Health and Human Service credentials are. It's not like Alex Azar, who worked for pharma." With all due respect to the senior senator from Texas, working for the pharmaceutical industry is not the only way to get experience in health care. Some might argue it's exactly the wrong kind of experience for an HHS secretary. The truth is, Xavier Becerra is eminently qualified. He worked in the House of Representatives for 2 decades, always very involved in advancing the health care of his constituents. And he has a particularly long track record as an advocate of women's health. As Attorney General of California, he became one of the foremost legal experts on our nation's health care laws. I must say, it's particularly rich for this Republican majority to raise concerns about whether Biden cabinet nominees have every last pristine qualification for their posts. Not so long ago, nearly every Republican in this chamber lined up to make an oil executive the Secretary of State. I don't remember too many Republican concerns, quote unquote, when President Trump nominated a retired neurosurgeon to be Secretary of HUD, or when he put Rick Perry in charge of the Department of Energy, an agency he wanted to abolish before learning it maintained the nation's nuclear stockpile and that he would be in charge of it. If memory serves, this Senate Republican majority confirmed a Secretary of Education whose only qualification for the job was she used her inherited fortune to try and privatize American schooling. Look, the country needs to move on from the past 4 years, but Senate Republicans can't pretend like it never happened. After the sordid caliber of nominees that this Republican majority confirmed over the past 4 years, it will be impossible to take these complaints about Biden's nominees very seriously. I yield the floor and note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.